Idlib-Ski, Syria. Pitch black night, no moonlight. This area was an unofficial no-fly zone, but the lifeline of special operations. From an anonymous forward operating base, a squadron of 4 Russian Air Force Mi-28 Newtons attack helicopters roared and took off. They flew at extremely low altitude, hugging the desert trails, carrying anti-tank missiles and rockets. Their objective: supporting Special Forces infantry in danger on the ground. Simultaneously, 30 kilometers away, 2 U.S. Army AH-64 and Apache attackhelicopters, equipped with millimeter-wave radar, were silently patrolling. They had not received orders to attack, but had received warnings of unusual movement. Suddenly, both sides detected each other. The electronic warfare sensors of the Russian Mi-28 Newtons helicopters immediately roared. The Russian pilot activated the Vitebsk system, creating an electronic firewall around the squadron. The US Apache helicopter screens immediately flashed and filled with static. Warning, warning, strong electronic warfare. We are being hard-locked, the US Apache pilot yelled. The confrontation was no longer speculation. It was direct warfare. Both sides executed hard turns, trying to lock targets using infrared sensors. The Russian squadron released Attica anti-tank missiles. The US squadron launched Hellfire anti-tank missiles. The night sky was torn by the fiery trails of the missiles. The missile versus missile confrontation erupted. The US Hellfire missiles, guided by laser, raced straight toward the Russian squadron. Simultaneously, the Russian Attacker missiles, guided by radio wave, also sped toward the Apaches. The night sky was shredded by a series of explosions. Pilots on both sides maneuvered frantically, launching heat flares and radar chaff. The sound of metal screeching as shrapnel from missile explosions grazed the airframes. One Russian Mi-28 Newtons was too slow to evade. A Hellfire slammed into the tail rotor. The explosion ripped the entire tail section off. The Russian helicopter immediately lost control, spiraling down like a giant top. It slammed into the desert, creating a colossal fireball. The bodies of the 2 Russian pilots were burned alive and crushed. Inside, the molten metal wreckage. But Russia had also retaliated. One Attacker missile broke through the defenses. It struck the ammunition bay of one AH-64E Apache. The explosion was not large, but it detonated the entire 30mm shell belt. The Apache was torn apart from the inside. Blood and fragments of the US pilot's body sprayed from the cockpit, mixed with the exploding cannon rounds. The helicopter broke in half, plummeting. The long-range engagement ended with equal losses. Now it was time for close-quarters combat. The 3 remaining Mi-28 Newtons and the single AH-64E Apache, in a fury, charged straight at each other. The single US AH-64E Apache helicopter now faced 3 Russian Mi-28 Newtons. The US pilot, in an act of desperate courage, did not retreat. He charged straight into the middle of the Russian formation, deciding the only defense was full-force attack. The 30mm M230 chain gun under the Apache's nose roared. A wind-daring shriek echoed. A burst of high-explosive dual-purpose rounds shattered the cockpit of the lead Mi-28 Newtons. The armored glass shattered. The Russian pilot was shredded by the 30mm rounds. Blood and brain fragments erupted, splattering onto the control panel. The Russian helicopter stalled, its engine on fire, and plummeted into the desert, creating a colossal fireball. But the 2 remaining Mi-28 Newtons managed to turn in time, flanking the Apache from both sides. They opened fire simultaneously, a rain of unguided S-8 rockets poured down. The Apache tried to evade, but one rocket tore apart the tail section. Metal shattered, hydraulics leaked. The Apache lurched violently, losing temporary control. At the same time, the 23mm autocannon of the second Me 28 Newtons sprayed the Apache's fuselage with rounds. Rounds pierced the thin armor, embedding in the engine compartment. Fire began to erupt. Engine on fire, we're going down, the US pilot yelled. The burning AH-64E Apache attempted an emergency landing in a clear area. It slammed hard into the ground, the landing gear shattering. Fire quickly consumed the entire fuselage. The AH-64E Apache slammed into the arid desert, shattered into a heap of twisted metal. Flames from the damaged engine erupted fiercely, licking the cockpit. The 2 US pilots, severely wounded and with broken bones, from the horrific crash, screamed, struggling to escape the wreckage. In the sky, the 2 Russian Me 28 Newtons helicopters did not leave. They circled like vultures, ensuring no one survived. No prisoners, the lead Russian pilot roared. He pressed the trigger. The 30mm autocannon under the helicopter's nose roared. Explosive rounds rained down onto the burning Apache, turning it into an inferno of firepower. The burst tore apart the cockpit. The US pilot, who was trying to pull his co-pilot out, was shredded by the cannon rounds. His body exploded into a rain of blood and burning flesh. Flames engulfed, incinerating the remaining trapped pilot alive. Just then, the Russian Spetsnaz Special Forces Infantry, that the Me 28 Newton squadron was supporting, reached the battlefield. They moved in high-speed Tiger armored car, armored vehicles, racing across the sand dunes. Seeing their comrades' fire had cleared the battlefield, the Spetsnaz jumped out, weapons ready, advancing toward the 2 US helicopter wrecks to retrieve technological evidence. But they had walked into a trap. The US Special Forces soldiers, the initial target of the Russian squadron, were hidden in a nearby ravine. They had witnessed the entire air battle and the slaughter of the Apache pilots. Now it was time for revenge. Ambush, fire. From the rock crevices, M320 grenade launchers, M320 grenade launcher, and M249 SAW light machine guns fired simultaneously. The US Special Forces opened fire from the rock crevices. 40mm grenades from the M320 grenade launcher exploded right in the middle of the Russian Spetsnaz formation. Shockwaves and metal fragments tore the desert air. 3 Spetsnaz soldiers were thrown into the air, their bodies torn to pieces before falling. A Tiger armored car was hit by a grenade explosion under its chassis. Its tires exploded. The vehicle flipped, crushing 2 soldiers who were trying to hide next to it. The Spetsnaz forces, ambushed, immediately showed their elite training. They did not panic. They rolled into cover, throwing smoke grenades, and returned fire fiercely with AK-12 assault rifles. The battle was now a brutal, close-quarters gunfight between the 2 most elite special forces in the world. A US Special Forces soldier, reloading his M249 SAW machine gun, was struck by a Spetsnaz sniper using a Dragunov. The round pierced his throat, blood gushing violently from the back. He collapsed, dying instantly. His comrade roared, emptying a whole machine gun belt at the sniper's position, pulverizing the rock into dust. From the flank, 2 Spetsnaz soldiers charged, throwing RPOA Schmel thermobaric grenades. The grenade flew straight into the ravine where the US team was pinned. A white-hot fireball erupted, sucking all the oxygen out. 3 US Special Forces soldiers had their lungs ruptured from within by the pressure wave. Blood poured from their masks. They collapsed, suffocated inside their own armor. Just then, the 2 Russian Me 28 Newtons helicopters, seeing their infantry attacked, returned. They fired S-8 rockets. Hell once again poured down onto the desert, crushing both the US position and the unfortunate Spetsnaz who flew too close. The S-8 rocket barrage from the two Russian Mi-28 Newtons helicopters pulverized the entire ravine. This was an act of indiscriminate destruction. Fire and metal fragments tore everything apart. The last US Special Forces soldiers, already stunned by RPOA Shmel, thermobaric grenades, were torn apart by the rocket shockwaves. Their bodies were thrown against the rock face, blood and bone fragments shattered, splattering. The Russian Spetsnaz forces, engaged in close combat, were also caught. An S-8 rocket struck a Tiger armored car, carrying reserve troops. The explosion blew the vehicle up. The bodies of the Russian soldiers were burned and mutilated beyond recognition, mingling with the corpses of the US soldiers. The Russian pilots circling above looked down at the inferno they had just created. They had accepted the sacrifice of their own ground forces to ensure not a single US soldier survived. After the rocket barrage, they switched to the 30mm autocannon. They slowed, circling, shooting at anything still moving below. Explosive rounds tore up the ground, shredding the dead bodies, turning the battlefield into a viscous red sludge, mixed with sand, blood, and molten metal. The US Special Forces ambush had failed miserably. Their entire unit was annihilated in a brutal slaughter, crushed between the Spetsnaz fire and the destruction from the air. No more gunfire came from the US side. Only the crackling of the fires remained. The two Russian Mi-28 Newtons helicopters circled one more time, their thermal sensors sweeping the dead ground below. There was no thermal signature of life. Only smoldering craters and heaps of molten metal remained from the US armored vehicles. The support mission was complete. They silently turned, vanishing into the Syrian night sky. Beneath the ground, the surviving Spetsnaz Special Forces soldiers, covered in blood and dust, began to crawl from their hidden positions. They had lost nearly half their unit, crushed by their own friendly fire support. But they had won. They wasted no time. They moved systematically, walking over the pulped flesh of US soldiers and their comrades. They did not treat the wounded. They executed anyone still moaning, friend or foe, with a single suppressed pistol shot to the head. Blood seeped out, mixing with the cold sand. Their objective was technology retrieval. They rushed to the destroyed AH-64E Apache wreck. Despite the still burning flames, they used crowbars to break off the control panels, ripping out computer blocks and millimeter wave radar systems. They collected everything: the pilots' helmets, Hellfire, missile fragments, and any remaining encrypted devices. A Spetsnaz soldier found the shredded body of a US Special Forces soldier, his hand still clutching his rifle. He stomped on the corpse, breaking the charred fingers to take the weapon. The slaughter had turned into a cold and brutal battlefield cleanup. After collecting all valuable technology fragments from the AH-64E Apache wreckage and the weapons of the US Special Forces soldiers, the Russian Spetsnaz forces loaded the bags onto the remaining Tiger armored cars, still operational. They did not carry their comrades' bodies. They only carried their weapons. They silently departed, vanishing into the desert, leaving behind a scene of absolute carnage. As dawn began to break, the weak light illuminated a hellish scene. The ravine, once the battlefield, was now a smoking scar on the Syrian earth. The wreckage of two AH-64E Apache, and one Mi-28 Newtons lay tangled together, burned, until only the blackened metal frame remained. Around them, dozens of bodies of US Special Forces soldiers and Russian Spetsnaz soldiers lay scattered. Blood had frozen in the morning cold, mixing with hydraulic fluid and sand. Severed body parts. An arm wearing a tactical glove. A torso vaporized by an S-8 rocket. S-8 rocket. A boot with a foot still inside lay scattered. The stench of burnt flesh and gunpowder was thick in the air. The entire area was pulverized by 30mm rounds and thermobaric explosions. Not a single living creature remained. The first direct confrontation between Russian and U.S. special forces in the Syrian sky ended in total destruction and mutual slaughter. There was no victor, only a dead land and the heavy silence of the desert.